Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we're going to continue with our lesson. We're on the second principle in the first quarter of the Kitab Al-Arba'in fi Usul Din, which discusses aqaid and Islamic beliefs. So here Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he states, وَأَنَّهُ لَا يَحُلُّ فِي شَيْءٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not inhabit anything. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in a place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not taking up space. He is transcendent beyond time and space. So He is not in a thing. وَلَا يَحُلُّ فِيهِ شَيْءٍ. Nor does anything inhabit Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not such a thing that accepts things inside His being. First of all, He's not a physical being. He's not something that you can touch and not really in a direction. So nothing goes inside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ta'ala an yahwiyahu makan. He is exalted beyond being enclosed by a place. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not enclosed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not surrounded by places. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in heaven. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in a place. He is exalted. He is beyond that. كما تقدس عن أن يحده زمان. Just as He transcends being limited by time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not limited by place, just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not limited by time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is transcendent from both of these, as both of these are His creatures, or His creations, we could say. Time and place are creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so He is not limited by His own creations. بل كان قبل أن خلق الزمان والمكان. Rather, He existed before creating time and place. وهو الآن على ما عليه كان. And He is now just as He has always been. So before the creation of time and space, before the existence of the universe, we know the universe came into being. There was a period of time when the universe was not there. Then the universe is there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates it. When the universe is created, that is the beginning of time and space itself. Before the creation of the universe, there is the Creator. He exists. He has attributes. He is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So time and space are not created. Allah exists before that. And then He creates time and space. And then He does not enter His creation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is transcendent from merging with His creation. He doesn't resemble His creation. The creation does not resemble Allah. The creation is time and space. Allah is beyond that. And just as He was before, perfect with all of His attributes, He's still like that. He didn't change. He didn't enter His creation. وَأَنَّهُ بَائِنٌ عَنْ خَلْقِهِ بِصِفَاتِهِ. He is distinguished from His creation by His attributes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is separate from His creation. He's not like His creation. He's ba'in. He's not inside the creation itself. لَيْسَ فِي ذَاتِهِ سِوَاهُ وَلَا فِي سِوَاهُ ذَاتُهُ. There is nothing within His essence other than Him, and His essence is not within anything. So here he says in the Arabic, لَيْسَ فِي ذَاتِهِ سِوَاهُ. In His wujud, His existence, His being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's essence, who Allah is, what Allah is, there's nothing but Allah. Like Allah is Allah, He's not fused with anything. And outside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creation, time, space, the universe, planets, beings, angels, realms, the different seven heavens, earth, all of these things are not Allah. So there is no overlap between Allah and His creation. There's no fusion of Allah and His creation. Allah is Allah and the creation is the creation. Both are separate. وَأَنَّهُ مُقَدَّسٌ عَنِ التَّغَيُّرِ وَالْإِنْتِقَالِ. He, Allah, is transcendent above change and transition. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not move around. So why doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala change? Because He is perfect and eternal. He is in a state of perfection. Changes would entail that that state of perfection is thus changed. So if something is perfect, there's no need for change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfect, He doesn't change. The same Allah who created the entire universe, He is the same as He was, as He is today. Same Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't move around. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a physical body to move around. لا تحله الحوادث. Occurrences do not subsist within Him. So things that take place, occurrences, something that occurs to a person may move, or a person's temperature may change. That's an occurrence, something that happens within a person. Or a person's color changes. These are occurrences. These do not occur within Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah doesn't undergo changes. His attributes don't undergo change. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with all of His perfect traits and attributes, neither does Allah change, nor does His attributes change. He was as He is, He will be in the future, and He is that way today. So that is what it means here. No taghayyur, nor change, no change, nor movement. لا تحله الحوادث ولا تعتريه العوارض. Okay, so here it doesn't seem like this was translated, or rather, let's see here. He is transcendent above change and transition. That is the translation for وَأَنَّهُ مُقَدَّسٌ عَنِ التَّغَيُّرِ وَالْإِنْتِقَالِ. Then لا تحله الحوادث. Occurrences do not subsist within Him. ولا تعتريه العوارض. So this is not translated, or these two sentences are both fused and translated together. So it's basically saying occurrences don't happen inside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence, and awarid, which are like attributes that are acquired. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't acquire attributes. So these acquired traits do not come in Allah. For instance, a human being may gain knowledge. This is an acquired trait. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not gain knowledge. He has knowledge, which is different. He has always been described with majesty that transcends cessation. It says, بَلْ لَا يَزَالُ فِي نُعُوتِ جَلَالِهِ مُنَزَّهًا عَنِ الزَّوَالِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always been described. He always had, with His grandeur, His greatness, He always had qualities that transcend cessation. Meaning, any quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, He won't lose it. He has all qualities of perfection. He doesn't gain any, He doesn't lose any. وَفِي صِفَاتِ كَمَالِهِ مُسْتَغْنِيًا عَنْ زِيَادَةِ الْإِسْتِكْمَالِ. And His perfect attributes have no need of completion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such that there is no attribute of Allah that needs to be critiqued or tweaked or increased, because you cannot increase it. It is perfect. So because He's perfect, there is no need to increase in any way. Alright, and that's the end of that page in the Arabic. وَأَنَّهُ فِي ذَاتِهِ مَعْلُومُ الْوُجُودِ بِالْعُقُولِ. His existence is known through the mind. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be known. His existence can be known, is what Imam al-Ghazali is saying here. A human being can deduce, can conclude the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by looking at the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So his existence can be concluded by a human being. We have that capability by using the minds. بالعقول. مرئي الذات بالأبصار. And he shall be seen by the virtuous in the permanent abode as a blessing and kindness from Him. So here, مرئي الذات بالأبصار means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is visible through the eyes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in a place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not confined by time and space, yet Allah is visible. That is the belief of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Allah is visible, despite being transcendent. How will this occur? It is such a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept in store for certain pious slaves, those who go into Jannah, who will be successful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all of us successful in this life and the hereafter, and give us this huge blessing of seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our eyes. So it's not supposed to be interpreted as, seeing Allah means that you can feel His presence. You will be able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your eyes. As Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions in a hadith, the way you can see the moon, no one struggles in seeing the moon. You will also not struggle in seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam al-Tahawi mentions in his Aqidah that this will be without a kayfiyah. We cannot attribute a howness to it. How is it going to be? This is one of the special blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we cannot truly quantify how we will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a body, nor is it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is confined in time or space, but it is another viewing and seeing of Allah through the eyes, however, in a way that we cannot fathom in this world. And the reason why you can see Allah despite Him not being in a time and space is because He exists. Anything that exists can be perceived by the eyes. And we just have not come across something that exists yet is not in a time or space, because that's only Allah's attribute. So He will be visible despite not being in time and space, because He does exist. And inshallah, we will be able to see Him on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Those who are wretched, who will end up going to the fire of Jahannam, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us all, they will be deprived of seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those who earn His favor and ultimately go to Jannah, they will have this huge blessing. And that's what He says here. نِعْمَةً مِّنْهُ وَلُطْفًا بِالْأَبْرَارِ فِي دَارِ الْقَرَارِ. This is He will be seen by the virtuous in the permanent abode as a blessing and kindness from Him. وَإِتْمَامًا لِلنَّعِيمِ بِالنَّظَرِ إِلَى وَجْهِهِ الْكَرِيمِ. And a completion of bliss which will be achieved by looking upon His noble face. So, noble face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not in time and space. It is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means when He says this is something that is beyond our comprehension. But we will inshallah see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the belief of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And we have various ayahs in the Quran that talk about this as well, such as a verse in Surah Al-Qiyamah, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَى رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. There will be faces that will be radiant on that day, looking upon their Lord. So this is a clear verse stating that we will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is our belief regarding the transcendent nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, we're going to move on to the third chapter that Imam al-Ghazali has here in the section of Aqa'id and Beliefs. Al-Aslu al-Thalith fil Hayati wal-Qudra. The third chapter regarding life and power. Hayat and Qudra. So here he just writes Al-Qudra, but it's actually Al-Hayatu wal-Qudra. Life and power. Two attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned here in one chapter. He says, وَأَنَّهُ حَيٌّ قَادِرٌ. He is living, omnipotent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alive. We do say He is alive. He has life. It does not resemble human life or life of any creature, because the life of any creature is something made and it has a beginning and it has an end. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's life is not like that. What do we mean when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has life? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has these attributes. He has many different attributes that He tells us of in the Quran. He is Rahman, He is Rahim, He is Ghafoor, He is Rahim. He is merciful, He is forgiving, He's Al-Wadud, He's loving. He is Al-Alim, He has knowledge. He is Al-Qadir, He has power. So all of these attributes could not exist if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alive because live things have attributes. But his life is very different than ours. We call his life wajib. It is absolutely necessary existence for Allah. And our life is not wajib, it's not necessary. Which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this entire universe exists, Allah must exist. As for you and I, we don't have to exist. If Allah didn't want us to exist, we wouldn't have to. It's a favor from Him. So we're very temporal, we're contingent beings. We come into existence, we go out of existence. There's no big difference, there's no issue if we are not existent. However, a person cannot say that Allah doesn't exist, because where did this universe come from? So Allah is living and He is qadir. He is powerful, omnipotent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has immense power, unlimited power. Jabbarun qahirun. He is overpowering and overwhelming. Jabbar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a lot of power. He overpowering, essentially. Qahir is very similar in nature, these two names of Allah, attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Overwhelming. His attributes cannot be quantified, meaning you cannot understand how much knowledge Allah has, how much qudra and power Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. لا يعتريه قصور ولا عجز. He is not afflicted with inability or incapacity. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no weakness and no attribute of fault. Allah has all attributes of perfection and no attribute of weakness. Is no inability, only perfection. وَلَا تَأْخُذُهُ سِنَةٌ وَلَا نَوْمٌ. Not beset with fatigue or sleep. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not get tired, nor does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sleep. These are weaknesses. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from all weaknesses. In general, Muslims must believe that Allah has the attributes of perfection, and Allah is free from any attribute of naqs, meaning weakness, defect, and lowliness. Allah has no attribute like that. And these are the details in that regard. وَلَا يُعَارِضُهُ فَنَاءٌ وَلَا مَوْتٌ. And He is not affected by annihilation or death. Fana, meaning ceasing. Allah will never cease. Maut, death. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never dies. He has life, He always did have life. There will never be a moment when Allah doesn't have life. So He is what we call wajibul wujud. His existence is necessary existence. وَأَنَّهُ ذُو الْمَلِكِ وَالْمَلَكُوتِ. He possesses dominion, might, and omnipotence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَأَنَّهُ ذُو الْمُلْكِ وَالْمَلَكُوتِ وَالْعِزَّةِ وَالْجَبَرُوتِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses dominion. He possesses everything. He's the owner of everything. He creates it and He's the true owner. You and I may feel like we own things, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to describe ourselves as owners, but the haqiqi and true owner of a thing is the creator and the one that has full control over it, and that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't have full control of even our own bodies. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually the true owner. Allah has might and Allah has omnipotence. Izzah, Jabarut. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has extreme power, extreme ownership of anything. He does whatever He wants, however He wants, whenever He wants. Lahu as-sultanu wal-qahr. All power, all force, all creation, and all authority belong to Him. And that's the translation of Lahu sultanu wal-qahr wal-khalq wal-amr. Force, creation, Allah has all force, all power. All creation, He creates everything. There's no one and nothing that can create anything besides Allah. Humans don't create their actions even. Allah creates the action. There's no creator but Allah. Allah is the sole creator. There's no one who creates besides Him. He's overwhelming, and He has the command. He has al-khalq, the creation, wal-amr, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the command and power over everything. وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ. The heavens are enfolded in His right hand. So what does this mean? The heavens are enfolded in His right hand. Allah has power over everything. entire heavens, entire earth. Just as if you had something in your hand, it's so easy to manipulate. If you have a pencil in your hand, you do whatever you want with it. You can break it, you can use it, you can sell it, do whatever you want. You have full control, it's in your hand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this with the heavens. Full control, authority, whatever He wants, whenever He wants. He can destroy it at the blink of an eye. Anything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, He does. وَالْخَلَائِقُ مَقْهُورُونَ فِي قَبْضَتِهِ. And all of creation is subjected to the force of His grip. Everyone is under His power, under His command. وَأَنَّهُ الْمُتَفَرِّدُ بِالْخَلْقِ وَالْإِخْتِرَاعِ. He is the sole creator and inventor. No one creates. No human can create. Allah is the sole one that does it. Anything that comes into existence, it's actually because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to come into existence, and He made it. Now humans may have ideas, they may invent things, but really it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who allows that to happen and creates it. Like I mentioned, even human actions are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't create. We intend actions, and Allah gives us the qudra, the capability to intend through His power. So we intend through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's intention. Allah says, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Anytime you intend and it occurs, it's because Allah has intended it. So all your intentions are within the grander intention of Allah. If something has occurred, it meant that Allah has intended it. And sometimes you intend something, it doesn't happen. That's because Allah intended that it won't happen. المتوحد بالإيجاد والإبداع. The only one capable of bringing these things into existence. He's a single one that can bring stuff into existence. No one of His creation can do that. The creation does not have the power of creation itself. They are the maf'ul, the result of Allah's creation. They don't have the power of khalq and creation themselves. وَقَدَّرَ أَرْزَاقَهُمْ وَآجَالَهُمْ. He created the creation and their actions. As I mentioned, all the actions are creations of Allah, and determined their provision and their lifespans. So our lifespans are known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He has already determined how long we will stay on earth. Everything is known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our futures are known to Him, and He has already recorded our lifespan. لا يشذ عن قبضته مقدور ولا يعزب عن قدرته تصاريف الأمور. Nothing imaginable is outside of His grasp, and the realization of any matter cannot escape His power. So there's nothing that is without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, outside of His knowledge, outside of His power. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has power over everything. Okay, I read this. لا تحصى مقدوراته. The creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the decisions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything that His power has, what the things that Allah has power over, you cannot count them. They're innumerable. وَلَا تَتَنَاهَى مَعْلُومَاتُهُ. The knowledge of Allah is unlimited. The things that Allah knows is unlimited. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's life and His qudra. Allah is alive and Allah has power over all things. The next chapter is in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge, the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-aslu rabi' fil ilm, the fourth principle, knowledge in Arabic, al-ilm. وَأَنَّهُ عَالِمٌ بِجَمِيعِ الْمَعْلُومَاتِ. He is knowledgeable of all things. Anything that exists, anything that can exist, anything that is impossible to exist, Allah knows all of them. محيط بما يجري من تخوم الأراضين إلى أعلى السماوات. And His knowledge encompasses whatever may happen from the bowels of the earth to the highest heaven. Anything that happened, that is happening, that can happen, that will happen, Allah knows all of it, all possibilities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. From the depths of the earth to the seven heavens, all the angels, the jinn, the humans, the creatures, Allah knows every single atom of everything. لا يعزب عن علمه مثقال ذرة في الأرض ولا في السماء. An atom's weight in the heavens or earth does not escape his knowledge. There's nothing that Allah doesn't know, and nothing can escape his knowledge. He's overpowering. He's qahir, qahhar. بل يعلم دبيب النملة السوداء على الصخرة الصماء في الليلة الظلماء. Rather, he sees the black ant as it crawls along a jet black boulder in the dark of the night. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need light to see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need eyeballs and pupils and irises to see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need distance to see. That is our situation. We have eyes and we have, these mechanisms, these machines that require light rays to come into our eyes and for us to perceive that. Allah is not like that. He sees without needing a body. He sees things as they are. Whatever the thing is, how it is, Allah sees it without the necessity, without distance, without light. And that's what he's saying here. He can see the black ant as it crawls on a jet black boulder in the dark of a night. Because Allah's vision and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sight is not like ours. He doesn't need the tools of eyes nor anything. He's not in need of his creation. وَيُدْرِكُ حَرَكَةَ الذَّرِّ فِي جَوِّ الْهَوَاءِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perceives the most minuscule creature as it is tossed about by the wind. So he says here, حَرَكَةَ الذَّرِّ. A dhar can be a particle, or it could also be an ant. Here it means particle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the movement of particles in the atmosphere due to wind, how it moves tiny small little particles that you may see when the sunlight comes in. You may see these little particles floating around. Allah knows each one of them, their movements, where they will go, where they came from, what are they comprised of. Every single atom is known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and their movements. وَيَعْلَمُ السِّرَّ وَأَخْفَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows every secret and what is still yet more hidden. So what is more hidden than a secret? Allah knows your secrets. What you hold inside your mind and your heart, Allah knows that. Allah knows that which is even more hidden than that. What's more hidden than that? Thoughts that you don't even know that you're having. Daydreaming, or your dreams that you forget, or things that you think and say that you don't even realize that you're saying. Your subconscious mind. Allah knows the subconscious mind and the details of it, exactly what you're thinking. وَيَطَّلِعُ عَلَى هَوَاجِسِ الضَّمَائِرِ. He is aware of the misgivings of every conscience. So hawajis al-dama'ir, hawajis are those thoughts that are like the precursors to actual thoughts that you have, like your detailed thoughts that you conjure up in your mind. Before that, there's many stages of the development of a thought. The hawajis are the earlier stages. So those it's translated as misgivings, things that enter the mind and go and you don't even realize it's happening all the time. Sometimes you catch on and you can actually pay attention to these thoughts coming in and out, especially if a person does meditation. They can sense these different thoughts coming in and out, especially when you're trying to silence the mind. You will notice a lot of these thoughts coming in and out. Allah knows those. وَحَرَكَاتِ الْخَوَاطِرِ وَخَفِيَّاتِ السَّرَائِرِ. He knows the development of every conscious thought and every secret's innermost details. So Allah knows the precursors to thought as they're developing, the subconscious mind. He knows what's happening there, even though we don't. He knows what we dream about, the things that we forget. Then the thoughts that come into the mind and we're aware of, Allah knows those. Then the thoughts that we entertain and develop, Allah knows those too. Then what we conceal in the heart and don't let anyone know, Allah knows those too. And of course, everything in between and everything after that. بِعِلْمٍ قَدِيمٍ أَزَلِي. Allah knows all of this through knowledge by which He perceives all of this. The knowledge by which He perceives all of this is a timeless, eternal knowledge with which He is unceasingly described. So Allah's knowledge is not something attained or acquired. It's eternal. The knowledge that Allah has, He knows what's going to happen, what happened, what will happen, what can happen. He knew all of this since eternity, before time and space, and He doesn't acquire new knowledge. The knowledge Allah has is absolute, exactly what's going to happen. So His knowledge is timeless, because He is timeless, and He was always there with His ilm and His knowledge. It's eternal, it'll last forever. And He is unceasingly described with it. Allah will always have this knowledge, and it cannot separate from Allah. It is His existence and His being. لا بعلم متجدد حاصل في ذاته بالحلول والانتقال. This knowledge, it is not a newfound knowledge that occurs within Himself by conveyance or transmission. As we mentioned before, knowledge or anything does not come into Allah. Allah does not gain attributes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change. So knowledge is not something that Allah acquires. It is not something that occurs within Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not something that comes in the being of Allah, and it's not something that exits Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His attributes are much different than human attributes. Human knowledge is something that is acquired, gained. A person may forget it. A person may lose it and then get it again. They may be reminded of it. They may completely forget it and have to relearn it. Allah is free from all of that. So these were the last two chapters that we did. We talked about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qudra and His hayat, and we talked about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ilm. And in the next chapter, inshallah, we move on to the 5th chapter, which is going to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's irada and His will. And that'll be for our next lesson, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us knowledge of His being, of His existence, and His divine attributes. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the proper understanding of beliefs, so that our ibadah and all our actions may be accepted. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the acceptance of those actions. وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.